Ever realize that voice in your head telling you who to be isn't even yours? We're pitting Helena Blavatsky's The Voice of the Silence against Max Stirner's The Ego in Its Own. One says to dissolve your ego into something higher. The other says to own it and treat every sacred rule as a ghost. We'll apply both to work and guilt to find a path that actually stops you from wasting years. What if most of the rules you obey every day are not real constraints, but hallways and phantoms you walk through simply because you were trained not to question them? Both books agree on one thing. Most of what you take as reality is actually an illusion running your life. In The Voice of the Silence, Blavatsky calls the world the hall of sorrow, filled with traps designed to ensnare your ego through what she calls the great heresy of separateness. You are told that this earth is only the dark entrance to a higher light, and every attachment to pleasure, status, or personal identity becomes a hook that drags you back into suffering. Stirner, in The Ego in Its Own, calls these controlling illusions spooks, the powers above, or the divine. He's talking about any idea that you treat as more real and more important than your own concrete living self. As a child, you might fear a parent's stern look or the physical natural powers that dominate you. But as you grow, you realize that behind all of those stands your own courage and your own power. A spook appears whenever an abstract idea, like freedom, humanity, morality, or duty, sits above you and commands you even when no one is actually there to enforce it. In both systems, when you feel that invisible pressure telling you a good person would do this or a real professional never says no, you aren't hearing truth, you are hearing training. The disagreement is about what you should do next: erase you to reach something higher, or erase the ghosts and stand fully in yourself. If every time you say "this is me," you are tightening a noose of illusion around your neck, should you trust any identity at all? Blavatsky's method starts with a brutal diagnosis. The mind is the great slayer of the real. Let the disciples slay the slayer. The everyday mind that says "this is I" is described as being caught in the webs of delusion. You live in three halls: ignorance, where you are born and die; learning, where every flower hides a serpent; and wisdom, beyond which lies the true indestructible source. Every time you cling to a feeling or a story about yourself, you are lingering in the lower halls and strengthening that heresy of separateness. Practically, the voice of the silence tells you to become indifferent to objects of perception. You are told to stifle the voice of flesh and kill in thyself all memory of past experiences to truly ascend. The path is about quieting each sense until only the inner sound, the sound, remains, and the personal self dissolves like a drop returning to the ocean. Let's look at a scenario. You're at work, constantly people-pleasing. You say yes to overtime and unreasonable demands because you can't stand it when someone is upset with you. You feel exhausted and inauthentic, but guilty whenever you try to resist. If you applied Blavatsky's method the wrong way, you might tell yourself, "My needs are an illusion, my exhaustion is an illusion, so I should ignore them." You keep saying yes, convincing yourself that self-sacrifice is spiritual. The result, your boundaries collapse even more, you burn out, and you're still trapped in the ego because deep down you still feel like a small self trying to please a judgmental universe. But if you apply it the right way, you treat both your fear of rejection and your desire to please as passing phenomena in the hall of learning. When your boss asks you to stay late, you notice the panic and the guilt as illusions rising in the mind, not as your true identity. You practice being deaf to the roaring voice of the great illusion. You might still say yes this time, but you do it consciously, seeing it as part of your training, and you commit to making decisions from the silent speaker within, not from fear. You become less controlled by the emotional noise. In the logic of the voice of the silence, the way out is to stop clinging to any personal me that the spooks can latch onto. You step back from every identity, worker, friend, victim, until awareness itself stands free. But what if killing the ego just creates a more dangerous spook? The sacred ideal of selflessness that ends up owning you more completely than any boss or parent ever could. Stirner's method in The Ego in Its Own begins from the opposite direction. He tracks how you were trained to bow to powers outside yourself, parents, teachers, reason, or society, and shows how you slowly internalize them as spooks. You might stop fearing your parents, but you submit to a new master, reason or the law, or some abstract ideal of what a good human is. Practically, Stirner asks you to stop chasing freedom as a phantom and instead center everything on yourself as the one who uses and discards ideas. You don't ask, what does freedom demand of me? You ask, when does this idea serve me and when does it just shackle me? You are invited to treat every supposed higher power, God, state, morality, as your property if it is useful, and as trash if it oppresses you. Take that same people-pleasing scenario at work. If you apply Stirner the wrong way, you might hear own your ego and interpret it as just pushing people around. You start snapping at colleagues and refusing every request just to feel powerful. You've just turned strength into a new spook, a role you feel forced to perform. You damage your relationships and you're still acting out of fear, the fear of looking weak. The right way to apply Stirner is to look at your guilt and fear as leftovers from old authorities. You ask, who benefits when I say yes against my own interest? You realize that the good employee who never says no is a ghost, not a law of nature. Next time your boss pressures you, you calmly say, no, I'm not available for that, not because of some rule about boundaries, but because you, as the owner of your time, do not choose to give it away. Your actions come from self-possession, not obedience. In the logic of the ego in its own, the way out is to become unapologetically yourself, to make yourself the central point, and stop kneeling to any ideal that cannot bleed love or pay your bills. You don't kill the ego, you kill its masters. When you feel guilty for wanting a good life, money, respect, comfort, whose voice is that really? And what happens if you follow it to the extreme? Imagine you're building a business on the side. You want financial freedom, but you feel ashamed for being too ambitious. Every move towards success feels like a betrayal of some invisible standard of purity. In a wrongly applied Blavatsky-style response, you might decide that wanting success is the fragrance of stupefying blossoms, so you suppress all ambition. You call your desires illusions and try to kill the memory of ever wanting progress. The result is stagnation. You stay in a low-impact role, telling yourself you're being spiritual while secretly resenting your life. The spooks here are purity and selflessness, and you're still obeying them. When rightly applied, you still pursue your business, but you train yourself not to base your identity on the outcome. When you succeed, you see the thrill as a passing spark and don't let it define you. When you fail, you watch the shame arise and fall without clinging to it. You see both as tests in the hall of learning. You played big in the world while loosening the belief that your worth is tied to your performance. Now consider the Stirner-style response. Wrongly applied, you might declare, I owe nothing to anyone, and cut off customers or partners because their feedback feels like authority. You make my ego first a rigid law. You sabotage your own business out of a reactive, spooked need to never be constrained. But rightly applied, you look at the guilt and ask, who taught me that wanting more is dirty? You identify the ghost, maybe a cultural story that equates ambition with evil, and you stop treating that story as sacred. You see your business as your creation, your property. You cooperate with others, not out of duty, but because mutual benefit is in your interest. You grow a business that fits you, not a moral ideal that crushes you. Side by side, the kill the ego path protects you from being enslaved by your own ambitions, while the own the ego path protects you from guilt and invisible masters. So, when your mind is full of spooks, voices of parents, teachers, and society, which book actually helps you walk out of the prison rather than just repainting the walls? If your main pain point is being ruled by a fear of loneliness or death, if you can't stop clinging to roles because you're terrified of being nothing, then the path in the voice of the silence goes straight to the root. It trains you to see through the emotional storms and listen for a deeper awareness that isn't threatened by loss. The payoff is inner serenity. However, if your main pain point is being ruled by abstract rules and social expectations, if you do things because that's just what one does, then the path in the ego in its own is far more practical. You learn to ask of every idea, does this serve me or am I serving it? You begin to live from your own center, using ideas as tools instead of thrones. Think about choosing a career. You want to leave a stable job for creative work, but you hear voices saying you will disappoint your family or that a real artist must starve. If you follow Blavatsky one-sidedly, you might renounce both stability and creativity as illusions and stay in your empty job, telling yourself that outer choices don't matter. You've let withdrawal become your new spook. If you follow Stirner one-sidedly, you might quit impulsively just to prove no one controls you, creating new chains of debt and stress. You've let defiance become your new spook. A rational hybrid looks like this. First, you use Stirner to unmask the external voices. You recognize family pride and the noble starving artist as ghosts, not laws. You give yourself permission to want a path that fits your concrete life. Then you use Blavatsky to keep your identity flexible. You remind yourself that being a successful creative or a responsible adult are just temporary roles. You don't let your career become your entire soul. In this way, Stirner helps you make the leap, while Blavatsky ensures the leap doesn't become a new prison. At the core, the voice of the silence asks you to kill the sense of a separate ego so that a universal self can shine through. The ego and its own asks you to kill every external idea that claims authority over you so that your unique ego can live without kneeling. Both are aimed at the same problem. You are not living from what is truly yours. You are living under ghosts. If you crave inner peace and feel strangled by your own attachment to outcomes, killing the ego will feel healing. If you crave autonomy and feel strangled by rules and expectations, owning the ego will feel liberating. But if you want a life that is both effective and deeply your own, the most rational conclusion is this: use Max Stirner to clear the room of spooks, so you can finally hear the voice of the silence, and use Helena Blavatsky to keep your ego from turning into the biggest spook of all.